Feskerma is Fàilte gan Ionad. It's good evening and welcome to Ionad, and thanks for coming along to our yarn. Our yarn with Colin and Sam about the commission. But before I start yarning to them about that, I want to just say a few words about how the commission came about, and in particular the fact that it was funded through Event Scotland and Visit Scotland scheme for Year of Stories 2022. Now, they were looking for proposals from organisations that covered quite a variety of themes, straightforward storytelling and children's events and festivals, but they were also wanting to look at new ways of telling Scotland's story in terms of environment, conservation and a love of the land itself. And for that reason, the two people to my right here are the ones that sprang to mind. Firstly, Colin, of course, probably best known as a singer-songwriter, obviously, and doting about singing with Sheryl Crow and meeting Bruce Springsteen and being in America and things. But to me, Colin, I know Colin probably best of all for his love of crofting and the land here and his interest in fishing and photography. Sam, again born and brought up here, trained in London in metalwork, and then having been a teacher for 12 years up in Orkney, where his mum came from, he decided to become a full-time sculptor and focus on his love of fish in particular, it has to be said, but also the moorland and the inspiration of the environment and love of fishing and everything has. So these two came to mind and they undertook the commission for us. However, I have to point out a quite important thing: they didn't know each other before they did this. I just knew them through, as I say, that love. So they can talk about that in a wee while. The work that Sam has produced is in the bar, and the work that Colin has produced is on the upper walkway. And later tonight you're very welcome to go and have a look at these with the artists and talk to them further. But I want to begin tonight with a piece of film that Colin has produced as part of the commission. And once we've seen that, then I'm sure they'll have plenty to tell you about fish in particular. If you're interested in fish, you'll hear about them tonight. So, Colin, see your film.
When you were young, did you dream like they used to dream? When you were young, did you feel like they used to feel long ago? When you were young, could you see what you see today? When you were young, was it all the same? Was it all the same? When you were young, when you were young, when you were young,
devote meaning to art and the environment, I think.
Yeah.
Sculptures and landscape. Now, as I was saying earlier on, you two didn't actually know each other before you began the process of this commission. So do you want to speak a wee bit about how you went about it and how you came up with the idea? I know, for example, Sam, you mentioned to me that you've got materials here that you've not used before, tweed and peat in the work. So to talk about the materials and also the design.
Yeah, it was lovely when Alex got in touch to say to do this, because it was quite cathartic for me to come back to Lewis, because I hadn't been back for many years. I left when I was 16, so to go back and to walk up the Col River, our house was the last house before the moor in Outend Col. So to go up the river and to see everything again, it was just brought home all the colours of my love of the moorland and that. And seeing the tweed colours in the shops and that I thought it was natural to bring in that to the pieces. So that was quite tricky. To involve peat and resin was quite tricky to do, a lot of mistakes and a lot of things. But it made a nice different backing. And having everything into weaving was quite nice to do. So yeah, that all came after walking up the Col River and seeing all the palette of colours. And I hadn't realised that all my colours that I use all come from the Col River and the moorland and the sea there. I hadn't realised that at all, so that was really daunting me. And then the next day, went fishing with Colin, and that's always good. That was always good.
I think that was the. It's always nice to have something in common, isn't it?
Yeah.
Especially when it's fishing, and I think you can meet anyone from around the world. If you've got fishing in common, you instantly have a lot to talk about. So yeah, that was quite good.
The only bad thing about that day was that Colin caught and I didn't.
Isn't the headspace of fishing a bit like what you both do anyway, with you was sculpture and you was songwriting? It's quite a solitary person. I know you go fishing with people here and then, but it can be a very kind of solitary
Yeah,
pursuit.
it is. I think I choose to go fishing on my own most of the time for that reason. I don't know, it's something about when you're creating, you'd like to find a bit of space and do something that gives you space in your head, and I think I find that with fishing definitely. But yeah, I think it does help, definitely. I think in this instance as well, like for having something to start upon, just having something. I mean, when you meet someone and you're like, right, let's put sculpture and music together, that's not an obvious thing to try and put together. But just having that little spark and something as simple as a love of salmon, that was what sparked it off, I think. Yeah.
Yes, I did ask Sam once what his favourite fish was, and I think we had to stop the conversation after half an hour or something.
Only half an hour.
But it was ultimately, it took you back to Lewis again. It was brown trout that you came up with and salmon.
Yeah, very much from. I suppose right before I was in school, I was always in the ditch outside the house, and I gradually worked my way down to the river. And once I was at the river and saw trout, and in fact, yeah, you could pull out something out of the river that looked like a Fabergé egg. It had such beauty, and that was me kind of hooked from then on. Because none of my family really fished, so it was just me that was drawn through water. So yeah, it came, and it's that moment that when you're fishing and creating, it's trying to make something permanent, like it's a moment shared with nature that you're trying to give a bit of permanence to with the actual work. So it's that you're in the mindset that everything just is in real time. I really like that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I like one of the first things that Sam said to me when we met as well was this idea of displaying the work in the environment that it was inspired by, and I just completely ran with that idea. I thought that was really nice, and especially being from Lewis, and like you're saying with the palette of colours, it's really interesting.
Yeah.
And even the reflection in the resin everywhere I went, it sort of reflected the natural colours and the skies and things like that. It was really amazing.
No, it was really exciting to put the actual work underwater. I really liked that. So,
Although
underwater.
I did nearly lose half of them. Yeah. In Barvis in the waves, one of them went for a bit of a swim, but yeah.
Did anybody actually see you do that, Colin, and
Yes.
wonder what you were doing?
Christine Davidson saw me in my wetsuit with a camera in Barvis with my bum sticking out the water, holding a piece of art, taking photos of it. Yeah.
Because they are quite heavy, they're metal, so.
Yeah.
And in your case, was there anybody who introduced you to fishing, or was it something that you became interested in yourself when you were young?
I don't think I had a choice. I think my dad had me in the boat when I was about 3 years old. Yeah, I think that was always going to be, but I don't know, it's just, fishing just sparked something in me. I think it's that thing you're talking about, like that connection. Like, you know, it's like some people leave Lewis, and the people that always stay seem to have a really strong connection or find something that really binds them to the land, and that was fishing for me. I just felt completely intertwined in the island through my love of fishing. It's funny. Yeah.
Well, you have that reflects even in your music videos where you're out with your road, but also photography. Now, one of the other things that we were talking about before was the folklore surrounding fishing as well, and all the superstitions surrounding fishing, because we're in the Hebrides after all, and there's superstitions attached to everything. Did you have any of these growing up? Was there any?
Yeah. The one I always thought was the weirdest one was you're not allowed to say salmon when you go out sea fishing. Or did I make that up?
You made that up.
Right. I made that one up. Yeah. Have you heard that
You
one?
must have told me.
Well, that's a new superstition that I just made up. Yeah.
Because you just call it a good fish.
A good fish, yeah. Salmon's called a fish because you can say something like breaking a leg or something in the theatre. No, Macbeth. You can't say Macbeth.
Not a.
You have to say that play.
And you're not meant to go fishing with a minister, which made it quite awkward when my dad became a minister. Thankfully, he didn't fish. That was okay.
But they did vary from these superstitions vary from island to island as well. We were speaking about that.
Yeah.
There were ones in Orkney that
Yeah, my
weren't.
granddad in Orkney, he would never eat mackerel. He thought that was a bad fish. But I think it was because he was spoilt when he grew up. Like he had turbot and halibut and every other kind of fish. So mackerel was maybe a bait fish for him. But yeah, there were things about that, and also ling. He didn't eat ling because they lived on drowned sailors, and ling are found around wrecks quite often. So maybe that stemmed from that.
Somebody did tell me once that it was bad luck to be able to swim if you were a fisherman. That's true, isn't it? I didn't make that one up. Yeah. I don't see the logic in that one. I think it's bad luck to fall in the water if you can't swim, but never mind.
Well, it was certainly the case on the islands that a lot of fishermen couldn't swim. So, but anyway, back to the moorland, because the moorland's really what you went for a day's fishing on the estate, and how did that go? Is this where you came up with the whole idea of what you were going to be doing with the commission?
Yeah, we talked. Yeah, we spoke about it. We didn't just fish.
Okay.
It was a really lovely day.
Yeah.
To bed with the dogs. I loved that. There were two dogs with us, two collies. Yeah.
No, it was great, and I think it really, it's a nostalgic thing, isn't it? I think especially for you being back on the island and going fishing and going to Grimmershire. You've never been to Grimmershire before, and that was the song I wrote for the film. It was that thing of like nostalgia of seeing something with like having a big gap from a place and coming back and seeing something with the same eyes but different eyes, that kind of thing. And I think you could see it in a lot of the sculptures that you sent as well. They were really seemed really steeped in nostalgia.
Yeah, I was worried because I thought I might be looking through rose tinted glasses before coming, but then when I came back, it was much better. It was it was beyond what I remembered. The beauty and the kind of what was there.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was really inspiring.
But yeah, it all came together really quick, I think. We walked, and usually when we went fishing to Grimmerstown, usually you take boats in between the locks, but it was really early in the season, so we walked, and it was quite a big walk up, and just that time, I think, yeah. I think all art commissions should be done fishing, actually.
I think so. It's a good way to start.
I'll suggest it, but I'm not sure they'll go for it. Now, back again to the moorland, that thing about you being away from home away from here for a long time and coming back. And given that we were, the theme of this was really to do with a changing environment. What changes have you seen?
No more houses. There was a big change.
Moorland hopefully hasn't changed that much. So
What has?
the moorland hopefully hasn't changed that much.
No, but you're always worried that it will, and that it will change. The peat banks going up, the peat banks all used to be open, and they all used to be cutting peats, whereas most of them were overgrown now. So that was quite a change. It was good because when I was in the call, salmon had really gone from the call, but salmon are back now. So that was really nice to see, and someone was actually looking after the river, and that was really good. So that was a positive change. Yeah.
And the other thing you've incorporated into this work is, Colin was hinting at it, is implements, old implements, I suppose. Or maybe what you think of as old implements. Because I'm the same vintage as him. They're kind of not old implements to me. The jevish, the
Shears.
thank you, the shears, and the pieces from the loom, and things like that.
Yeah. With the work that I do, tools are all they define it. So when I thought back, I naturally thought back to all the tools and how they affect the environment, and the shuttle from the looms and the peat iron. And I was trying to find our old peat iron because we left it underneath the bank, so I thought I didn't find it. Yeah, the tools were an intrinsic part of growing up and what you were using. So it was, and they're such lovely shapes. They're real form-following function because they're so functional. So it's dictated, but they've got real inherent beauty about them. So so that was where the tools came in, and the tools and stuff.
And you were saying that your grandfather was a stonemason, and yet you went into work with metal. You didn't.
No, metal seemed to suit me right from the off. I would have loved to have worked with wood because wood's got a lovely beauty and a warmth. And whenever you go into someone's workshop when they're working with wood, it's lovely, it's warm, it smells nice, whereas metal's cold and hard. But with wood, it's got too much life of its own. With metal, if you go wrong, you can hit it really hard with a hammer, and it doesn't matter so much. So you can, and also you can scrap it, and it doesn't crack or carry on moving unless you want it to. So metal really suited me. But I would have liked to try more stone because my grandfather and all that side of the family, they were all stonemasons. So I think that's where my love of tools and craft work came.
I think you'd be a bit modest because not everybody does what you do with metal. I mean, how long's a piece of fish? How long does it take for you to make a small fish, one of these small fish?
I've never timed it because because all the scales are hammered individually, and it made the metal chisels to hammer them. You spend hours sitting tapping on the anvil. And if you're doing like a few big salmon, then it takes ages and ages, and you go a bit mad while you're doing it. So I'll have different pieces on the go at a time. So that when you go out in the morning, you choose what you're going to do. If you're feeling not great and you're kind of underformed from the night before, whatever, you hammer scales all day as a kind of penance. And if you're feeling more in good form, then you do the engraving and all the bits that really take a lot of concentration. But usually I have about 3 or 4 pieces on the go at a time. With one of the small herring, I once counted how many hammer blows there were in it, and there was 987. Because I put a mark on the workshop floor every time I hit 100. So it's a few. And that's why I've got a wee bit deaf as well.
That's patience. But also on a serious side to that, you were diagnosed with MS a few years ago, and working with chemicals has played a part in that.
I think so. I think definitely, because when I had my blood checks, when I got diagnosed, I was really high in lead and mercury. And celium or something like that. So yeah, when you're young, you don't wear all the safety gear, and although those chemicals are cumulative, you think, oh, I'm young, it won't affect me. But after working 25 years or 30 years, yeah, things begin to catch up. So I would say it did have a part in kind of being diagnosed. Yeah.
And that's quite a high incidence on the islands generally, which is back to environment and...
Yeah. My dad had it, and so did 2 first cousins. So yes, it does seem to be prevalent. And Lewis and Orkney are both kind of hot spots for it.
Does anybody want to ask these young gentlemen a question? I can't see. Did you get a question? Oh. Wait.
Sam, it's Colin Macleod here. I was interested in what you were saying about putting your peat iron under the bank, under the peat bank,
Yeah.
and you left it there.
Why, did you find it?
No, I didn't. I was never going to ask you. Did you find, because when I came back home, that's one of the saddest things, was going out onto the moor and finding all the sort of debris of the families that had been there before.
It
Did you
was.
come across anything else? Just a question on that.
I suppose all the banks were familiar to me, and like, you know, they were pleasantly familiar, but they weren't clean anymore. They weren't clean cut from the year before. So, and yeah, there was, when me and my brother came back years ago, we found a go-kart at the bottom of a hill that we'd made on what we call Death Run. And, yeah, we found this, and that got to us. That kind of affected us. So it was nostalgic, but it was quite a nice nostalgia, thinking about the time and the people. When we first came back, we expected everything to be the same, and the same people, and the same everything, but it wasn't. So that, but it was lovely to be back, so that kind of overweighed the nostalgia. And I've stopped looking for Liptons in places now.
Seem to remember coming across plenty of empty bottles and things like that.
Yeah, no, when I went out to the loch at the end of the Colin River, yeah, there was still lots of tins. And there was a full one left. And I thought, oh, that's nice, someone's left that one. But one of the changes was there was quad tracks everywhere.
Yeah.
And that was new. I'd never seen that.
What are you finding on the moors, Colin?
Fish. and empty bottles of white macari, usually, in the bottom of the peat bank,
We'll cut that bit out. Anybody else got a question? Oh.
You were talking about the folklore associated with the fishing, and I was wondering do you ever, does it help you out, those old stories, with finding where the fish might congregate, and do you ever catch a fish and think, oh, there was a little bit of ancient wisdom buried in that bit of folklore that I once heard and it's come to fruition, or does it not, do the stories not help like that?
Yeah, it does. With salmon fishing, there's historical marks where when the salmon come into freshwater, they go to the same places every single year. So, and the records at Grimmerstad go back to, I don't know, 1820, 1830, something like that. And it's the same places in each lochs that people catch fish from. So yeah, they have a strange tendency. In the rivers, it's easy to find. It's like at the top of a pool and the bottom of a pool. But in a loch, there's no discernible features. There's no nothing. It's just through the generations, these fish go back to exactly the same spot for some unknown reason. But yeah, it's quite the mystery of it. It's a big appeal, I think, with fishing. Yeah.
Colin Macleod.
What I quite like is the terminology of the moorland, because I think when probably for both of you, I like the story of the moor, because as soon as you turn it to the environment, it becomes something that I government agency owned, and I quite like the fact that you both, in terms of your stories, have used moorland as the, if you like, taking ownership of what's rightfully yours. So I quite enjoy that, and like I say, I welcome that, being something that belongs to both of you and all of us, each and every one of us, as opposed to being, if you like, managed by a government agency. So I congratulate you both on getting into Moorland stories, because I'm very familiar with elements of both of them.
Yeah, from reading different books, you get an impression that there's been quite a big problem with illegal fishing and the salmon population going down. So you mentioned that in one place it's improved. Is that generally across the island that it's improved?
Yeah, it has been improving in the last few years. It's at odds with the rest of Scotland, where salmon fishing is in decline, and most of the north and west of the Atlantic Ocean, salmon fishing is in major decline. But for some reason, the islands seem to be making a bit of a comeback. Fishing's been quite good. In fact, one estate had its best year in 100 years last year. So.
In terms of fish stock?
Fish stock, yeah, they measure the fish stock by the rod catch. So the rod catch was the highest it's been for 100 years in June in Grimmerstown.
Right.
Yeah.
And you didn't get any of them.
Thanks.
There's next year. You shouldn't have left Colin so early that day.
No, I shouldn't.
Anybody else got a question?
So, did you choose a metal first, or the fish?
I chose metal. Yeah, I fished when I was in Lewis, and then we went to Edinburgh for a couple of years, and then I went down to London and chose metal. And when I left college, I was doing big abstract steel sculptures, probably loosely based on wrecks and things that I'd seen up in Orkney and everything rusted in Lewis. So it was all that rich colour, that rich browns that I loved. So yeah, that came through. And then when I left college and I had a family, I moved up to Orkney and started fishing again. I made a fish for just myself for the house. And friends saw it, and they kind of grew from there. And the abstract side of it comes into the frames and the background. The first fish I did were very trophy-like and very straightforward on boards. But yeah, it's gradually developed from there. So it's kind of grown from there. So it was metal first, and then the fish, and then they kind of combined.
They go together to a certain extent,
They've got that hard glint about them, so metal seems to suit the fish. Or as you used to call them when the rugby club up in Orkney, biscuit tin fish. I remember that.
I never said that.
Did I ask you what your favourite fish is?
Salmon. Yeah.
For
Salmon,
what reason though? For what reason?
I don't even know. Just something about them just really got me. Just love them. Yeah. Obsessed. Completely obsessed.
It's a really nice thing you said about catching salmon as opposed to going trout fishing.
Yeah, with trout fishing, like I'm probably much more of a trout fisherman, because living in Orkney, there's only trout, there's no salmon in Orkney. And trout makes sense. If you present them at the right fly, at the right depth, and in the right conditions, they will go for it. Whereas a salmon is totally, I find it quite illogical. And it's because they don't eat when they come in from the sea. So what they're doing is either through territorial or aggression or playing with it, but they decide to take it. So yeah, so I find that a salmon, if I get a salmon, I feel that it's more gifted itself to me than I've actually kind of done the business. But that's maybe the way I fish.
That's a very nice way of putting it, I think. Anybody else want to ask something?
It's something about your love of tools, and I have to say I have a love of tools as well. My dad's a carpenter, and I've always loved hanging around his workshop. And also that your grandfather was a stonemason. So did you kind of learn to make your own tools from him, even though you didn't use the same material, or was that something you just picked up?
I just really remember my grandfather chasing me out of his workshop all the time. But when I chose a college to go to, art college, I chose Camberwell because it was a really old-fashioned traditional college, and you spent a long time doing very monotonous tool making and welding courses and blacksmithing. So yeah, I chose that because I loved the whole thing about the tools and making the tools, and the fact that I've still got tools from when I made them in college, that they're still with me. So I really like all that, and you gradually gather more and more tools around you. Yeah.
Yeah, I can understand. I'm just doing a jewellery course up at the college, and we started making our first tools.
Yeah, and you never have enough hammers. I've got hammers. Yeah.
A part of that course as well seemed to be very scientific and chemistry based, because when you were explaining to me about how to put peat into the work earlier, I was like...
Well, one of my tutors was, he wrote a book, he was a chemist, and he wrote a book about patination of metals, and it really opened my eyes to how you can colour metal and all the different colours you can get. So yeah, that side of it is, yeah, it's very chemistry minded, and I'm always fascinated when you see a nice bit of metal somewhere and it's got a different colouring about it, that how that happened. So you kind of, it's a bit like alchemy, that you'll try and work out why it's happened and what made it happen. So when I was at the peat banks, I took some of the peat home with me and put it on clean sheets of brass. It turned out really, I thought it was really nice. So I thought, oh, this is great. So the next one I did it all and wrapped it up in cling film and sealed it for about 2 weeks. And then had my brother filming me opening it, and opened it, and it was just clean. It hadn't coloured at all. I worked out that I hadn't let any air get to it, so the oxygen hadn't. So yeah, you let air, and then so I'm always looking, when the blue colours that I often use, green's very easy, you use copper nitrates and sulfates and things. But the blue, I noticed in pub urinals actually, that there's a blue line and then it goes to green on the brass. And I thought, is that ammonia, or how do you get that? So what it is it's actually the flux that's in the solder at the joint. So once I found that out, I could put the flux into the copper nitrates and you get the lovely blue. So yeah, so I was working that out. So it is a bit kind of alchemy, and it's kind of, it's a wee bit uncontrollable, but you get a lot of really nice accidents, happy accidents, where you get really nice colour.
Don't tell people you get inspiration from urinals though. Colin, what about you? Inspiration from the moor? Is there anything, any songs that you've written that you can directly relate to writing while you're out in that headspace?
I think all of them, pretty much. Yeah, everything I write is stories from home, things I've heard, things that are true and things that are not so true. Great Lewis tradition of not letting the truth get in the way of a good story. But yeah, I think all of them. The space is important for me when you're out and about. It's not like a kind of, I don't know, go to the pub and hear a great conversation and go, oh, I'll jot that down. It's things kind of sitting there and percolate for a while, and I'll be out fishing and I'll hear something will pop in my head, and it will be from ages before. But yeah, it's all in there. When I was younger, when I was gillying, I think that's kind of where it started. When I was sitting in a boat rowing for 8 hours a day, looking at 2 people fishing. And all these thoughts would be kind of going. Interestingly, when I moved to London, it seemed to go away. It was a lot harder, and I spent a lot more time actually doing the physical act of songwriting. Like the first deal I ever had, I got like a year's grace period to go and write and record and work with producers and writers, and I would go in, try and write songs about home because that's what inspired me, but it didn't quite come. And then I'd go home on holiday for Christmas and write 10 songs. So I don't know, there is the environment, and I don't know what it is. It's just something about being, if you're from a place and it defines you, I think you have to be in that place to create.
It's like that kind of connection to them. Now I asked you this before, I know what you're going to say, but if you had to choose between your crafting life and your other life, what would you do? What would you do?
Well, I'm here. I'm not in London anymore.
I know, but if you really did have to make that choice.
Oh,
Because I know how, I mean, you're not going off on tour when there's lambing, for example,
Yeah.
I know that. And there's not many people who can see that.
yeah.
You know, hold the tour, the lambing ceased this year. What would you do?
I love being a musician, and I'm very grateful and thankful for the opportunities I've had, but I think I've always been a Hebridean first and a musician second. And that's been it since I was a young'un.
Sam, are you still consider yourself Hebridean or island? Or because you've got quite a mixed island background, don't you?
My dad was from Skye, and my mum was from Orkney, and we were always the Seanachas, like Mac and Seanach, just because we built our peat stack differently. We built it the right way with the peat square. So yeah, so it's always been island, and as soon as I had our first child, I had to get back to an island. So that's when we moved to Orkney, because a job came up in Orkney. But I needed to get back to an island.
And you're certainly influenced. I remember you telling me that the rust and Lewis was very inspirational with your work as well.
Yeah, no, everything rusted. My dad wasn't that hands-on really with the gear, so yeah, no, it was very inspirational.